Well, welcome everybody. Good to see you all. So, just reflecting on what to focus on this week, and good old Huberman Lab had an interesting talk. I think it's a good one. It might provide some neuroscience behind what we're doing. But there's a recent episode where he interviews Richie Davidson, who he's famous for doing a lot of the neuroscience around mindfulness meditation and seeing, what monks' brains look like under fMRI imaging versus everyone else's, and kind of looking at there's the state of mindfulness, which is like when we meditate, we kind of enter a state, but there's also a trait of it, and kind of seeing how, traits are things that are stable over time, that kind of are part of who we are, and just seeing how these kind of can over time kind of coalesce a little bit. And he was talking about just how much benefit even just 5 minutes of mindfulness can do a day. So it's just kind of a nice reminder to sometimes we, I don't have enough time, or, kind of beat ourselves up over, maybe only getting a few minutes in. But I think it's a good reminder that it all counts. 2 minutes is better than no minutes, kind of thing. So with that, I thought it was just kind of a neat thing. There's another book that it was reminding me of, which is called Buddha's Brain. And if you're interested in kind of the science behind meditation, that's also a really, I think, easy to read, good resource. But I thought, it'd be kind of fun to talk a little bit about the research. Obviously that's a whole dissertation and more than that, but just kind of touch on some of the things that we're doing and why we're doing it, and then kind of get into a meditation. I think it's kind of like feed our intellect maybe today, a little bit. So, I think one of the things that kind of stood out to me, especially within listening to Richie talk today, there are a lot of different types of meditations, as we've experienced in here, and they all do slightly different things. One of the things he said is, sometimes kind of as you work your way through different types of meditations, you might actually find yourself at a meditation where you are doing nothing but being present, not even focusing on a single thing, but just whatever's here. It's very hard. So that's why we don't start there. The closest we get to that is what we call choiceless awareness, which is just kind of letting the mind wander and kind of noticing kind of where it's present and being present with that, and kind of staying grounded in the present. So, but the reason I bring this up is because, one of the things that he kind of focuses on, and I think a lot of the research now is really leading heavily into, is the kind of neural structures that we have that create our default mode network. And so I'm just going to remind us what that is. I know you've probably all heard me say this, but we can use beginner's mind with this. And, no matter how many times I hear it, I don't know, personally, I need to hear it more. So I thought I'd share it. And just to say before that is that, what he talks about is mindfulness is really, from a neuroscience level, a way, and a psychological way, is to drop below that default mode network. It is the way. So on a kind of basic level, the default mode network is autopilot. Yeah, it's our autopilot. Autopilot is meant for survival. not for thriving, to survive. Yeah. So you can think about the default mode network as kind of three. It does three things, responsible for three things. One is creating a sense of self in space. So that usually requires a story, because we don't just go, I am here in space, it's like, I am here on this, on Earth, in Utah, in Salt Lake City. Like, we really get granular with it, right? And we need to have that, like, this sense of space, and I'll talk about why that is. The second thing is searching for danger. Yeah. So looking for danger to keep us alive. And the third thing is projecting that sense of self into the future. Yeah. So let's break this down. So I often like to think about this. The easiest way is, cave people time, cavemen, cave women. So when we think about that, living in a cave, you need a sense of self. So how big am I? As I walk outside, am I bigger than this bear or not? Am I bigger than a raccoon? Can I reach, this branch to get the stick? Like, we need to have this sense of self, because otherwise we just be walking around and like reaching for things, but I may not be able to grab it, or I might hit it because it's like right there, or whatever it is. So we need to have that. We also, again, need to be able to make judgments very quickly, because it's about survival. So then we, in that cave, right, we're searching for danger. We may not know if there is danger or not, but if we have a sense of self, we walk outside, we go, this bear is huge, it's bigger than me, that could be dangerous. It also has claws, that could also be dangerous. We may not actually know until we get attacked by the bear. Who knows? Like, we may or may not, and depending on how other people respond to it, we may not see it as a threat. But once we see it as a threat, this is where the projection of our own story, our sense of self, we project that into the future, right? Project that into the future so I can plan. So, so that it looks like this. So I just was attacked by a bear. That's really scary. But in order to survive, I also need to go outside and eat, right? So I can't just avoid the bear. So I've created the story of, okay, so I am smaller than the bear. The bear is this awful monstery thing that will hurt me at any moment. Who knows what I've created, right? But I'm starting to create the story because I need to have a sense of space and myself and others. I'm searching for danger, so I've identified the bear is the danger. And what comes next? Not only is the bear dangerous, but what do I do in the future to prevent that? Right? So now I can go, okay, well, I can get the stick. Maybe the stick can help. I can get other people. We can now plan for that because there is a problem. There is a danger. I've identified it. I've projected into the future, and I have this story. Now, next time, if I'm successful with that stick or the rocks or whatever I'm using, that becomes part of the story, right? Although I'm smaller, I still have, I can use these weapons, and, you can see where that's going. So that's all fine and dandy until we have civilization. When we have civilization, what comes after, you don't necessarily have to be worried about a bear or about others attacking you. I mean, within reason, right? I mean, there certainly are situations in which you do need to worry about that. But within, general framework, there's not a whole lot of reason for that. So what happens, that default mode network that is part of our, millions of years of evolution, where's the danger? Yeah. So the dangers start to go this way, and we start to see ourselves as the danger, right? Our emotions, our thoughts, the, parts of our body, whatever it is that we see as danger, we then start to feel that that's the problem. Yeah. And when we're in that default mode network, we then view something within ourselves as the problem. We're critical, we're really chastising ourselves. It could be chronic pain, it could be, parts of our mental health, whatever that might be is now the danger. We create a story around that and we project it into the future. Sound like anything? Rumination. right? So basically, we're kind of back to square one, back to rumination. That's what we're finding with the default mode network. The other thing with the default mode network is it has a negativity bias. So this is a bias towards seeing things in the negative. Yeah. Again, life or death. This makes sense. We need to see things negatively, because what's the upside of seeing it positively if a bear's running at you? Well, he might not attack me this time, crap, and then you get smacked, no. You got to be like, no, that bear will kill me, right? We got to believe the worst case scenario. So psychologically, what that looks like for us now is catastrophizing. You know what I mean when I say that? Like thinking the worst possible thing in a certain situation is going to happen. This often happens when we're ruminating. This is going to be the worst thing, whatever it is. So the interesting part, I think, is that they in this interview, the question gets asked to Richie, like, so do you think, like the Dalai Lama, for example, who's meditated his whole life, do you think he still has chaos inside, like all that's still happening, or is he just okay with it all happening in there? And I thought Richie's explanation was, just it's very simple and understandable, and I kind of liked it. It was just, he says, over time, like, it's not a jump, it's not a switch, it's a gradual process. But in the beginning, yeah, there was probably a lot of chaos there. And as he's meditated and felt anchored and centered and, keeps doing that there is less chaos inside, that it's become that, right? Because what he's trained himself out of is that default mode network. Yeah. So the default mode network isn't a bad thing. We need it. We do. I mean, think about the last time you were driving where maybe you didn't, like, driving's important, but maybe you had to focus on something else. Like maybe you were rushing in an emergency somewhere, or, there was other things happening that if we didn't have the default mode network, thinking about something else even, you might get in a crash, right? Like instead, that default mode network lets you go into autopilot so you can attend to something else. So again, not a villain, not a bad thing. It's just something to be mindful of, aware of, so that we can drop out of it when we're stuck in it. So default mode network, I'd say, is one of the biggest things when we talk about meditation and neuroscience. The other thing, though, that I think is pretty cool is there's just, there's also kind of the brain structures that are involved are kind of neat here. So I'm going to talk about this. And again, I'm kind of painting broad strokes without getting too into the detail, even though it feels like detail. There's a lot to talk about, but trying to give just an overview. One of the things with so we have the default network, but we also have kind of, a lot of people are wanting to put brakes on their system, meaning when I get into fight, flight, freeze, when I have this kind of emotional response, how do I calm down? It's usually what people, want out of meditation, want with other things. And so there's what we call bottom-up and top-down processing. So bottom-up, think about this as so I'm holding my hand out here, my arm is the spinal cord and the brainstem. Basically, as you go from the brainstem, this is like, we would call it our reptilian brain. This is in charge of like breathing and heart rate and just kind of autonomic stuff. It's also, it basically just keeps us alive. Then we get to like this middle part of the brain. This is what we call the mammalian brain, which has our fight, flight, freeze response. Okay, this is where like the amygdala is. Now we have our cortex, this outer part, which is kind of more of the human brain. Okay, so the human brain has this prefrontal cortex that can think and focus and executive functioning, all of that. So what happens is when we have a fight, flight, freeze instinct, that's really coming from that like very like reptilian, almost like mammalian brain, which just kind of goes, Rah! Yeah. It just kind of sends out the signal that something's wrong, and that's the fight, flight, freeze response. Well, what sits right by that amygdala, in fact, if this is the amygdala, it's just over here, is our hippocampus. The hippocampus, guess what it does? It chills the system out. That'd be cool. They're right next to each other. You'd think they'd work. In order to chill it out, what it needs is the prefrontal cortex to be online. Yeah? In other words, it needs thought. We need to assess something. Perspective matters here. So we need to be able to think. Because again, think about this. If a bear's starting to attack us, I need to be able to think what I need to do, but I also need to be able to say, now I'm no longer with the bear to stop feeling that way. Yeah? If I don't say that, I'm going to still feel that fight, flight, freeze, and that intensity. So what happens for a lot of us, especially if you are like, I've been finding I'm really reactive, or if you've had trauma in your past, what happens is the prefrontal cortex, actually, the connection between that and the amygdala and the hippocampus gets a little haywire. It kind of weakens, yeah? Because we're used to being on such kind of adrenaline and fight, flight, freeze that the prefrontal cortex isn't actually coming online. So there are some therapies. You've probably heard of cognitive behavioral therapy, and specifically cognitive therapy. The idea is if we put the prefrontal cortex online and put thought to it, we're actually going to create, so that was bottom-up processing I described. Well, top-down is coming from the prefrontal cortex to the amygdala and down the stem into your body. Yeah, that's top-down. So here's the cool thing, is when we're practicing mindfulness, we are literally strengthening the prefrontal cortex. And more specifically, strengthening the medial prefrontal cortex, which is in charge of so much stuff that psychologically, that it's like, if you were to say, if there's one part of the brain, if I could tap into and just kind of give a steroid to and be like, this would help everybody, it's that part. The reason is that part helps with emotion regulation. It helps with your ability to do so much. But the cool thing it's also in charge of is sensing our body, feeling it. So, isn't that interesting? We get so disconnected from our bodies through life, through trauma, all of that. So guess what's happening when we do that? It's kind of, that's the like bottom-up approach again. We don't want to go to our body. That's scary. I don't want to feel that. We stop using that prefrontal cortex. Yeah, so I'm kind of going in reverse now again. So we stop using the prefrontal cortex and we end up with that disconnection. Practicing mindfulness, the reason why there's also, I was listening to a Tina Fey and like Amy Poehler and some other people around 2020, they were bored, I think, and they did like a little sketch, like it was like a radio fake thing. They were supposed to be like play therapy. They were supposed to be therapists, like licensed therapists. And they kept going, well, where do you feel that in your body? And they just kept saying that over and over and over and like laughing and thinking it was so funny. And it's a stereotype of therapists, because we ask that question. We ask the question for a reason, because if you start to feel it and identify it in your body, and I don't think we had words for this in the past, you're actually strengthening that medial prefrontal cortex that's in charge of so much. Like, I'm not even going into how it's in charge of basically like all the ADHD symptoms and in charge of like everything. Not really everything, but in charge of a lot that matters. So I say this and present this just because as we're practicing this, it's so much like exercise. There's really no difference. You're exercising your mind. Yeah? I mean, that's the difference. But it's exercise. And I think that's what, Richie said he hopes people get. He said like now, because apparently, and Huberman was saying this too, like in the past, people didn't think exercise really helped. Like it was a thing where it's like, I don't know. And like, I don't know if that's really important. And now it's like, of course you exercise. You exercise if you want to be healthy. Well, he argues the same thing about meditation. You meditate to help your brain, right? So think about it like that. When you're doing it, you're going to the gym. And we all have, different relationships to the gym. And sometimes we're going a lot, and sometimes we're going never, and, few and far between. So, we're doing an exercise, yeah? We're doing a workout, just in a different way. So if it feels stretching, good. If it feels like after you're done, sometimes there's a lingering effect, good. That's what it's supposed to do. They said, like after you go to the gym and like you've worked out really hard and there's like the pain that you feel after that. They were actually, lactic acid, right? And that gets built up and it creates pain. They were saying meditation can also do that, And so as you practice more, it probably happens less. But there are times where, like, he pointed out, like, when people first start meditating, and I didn't actually know this until today. I kind of had a thought about this, but I didn't know it was so common, is the first week after you attend your first class of meditation or you try it, there's actually, the research shows, a predictable spike in anxiety. For those who struggle with anxiety, if you don't ever feel anxious, it's not going to just suddenly make you anxious. It's just all of a sudden people start to feel anxious. The reason for that is, one, you're actually aware that you are anxious, so you're paying more attention to it, so reporting it is higher. But two, because it's that lactic acid, it's like going to the gym for the first time. It's hard. Yeah. There's something different about it. But that doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It means it's actually helping. So, thank you for letting me nerd out for a little bit. There is so much more to review with that, but I'm going to stop there because I think the most important thing here is not how we understand it, but doing it and practicing it. So with that, I'm going to practice. So feel free to get into whatever posture you'd like for today. Asking yourself if you want to lie down, sit, whatever. Just letting yourself be present. If you'd like, you can close the eyes or keep them open, whichever you prefer. Just take a few deep, maybe cleansing breaths in and out. Giving yourself a moment to show up, to be here. Maybe even just giving yourself permission to be here. Whether you have things you're currently working on or just came from and can't wait to get back to. See if you can set those aside for just the next 20 minutes or so. Just as you would with the gym, putting down work or social media or whatever that might be for this period of time, doing the same here. It's sort of interesting with exercise, we're doing something. And oftentimes as we meditate, we talk about entering a mode of being. See if you can let this be a something. You're still doing something. You're showing up for yourself. You're practicing being in a different way. So in that sense, you are doing something. You're practicing how to be. Go ahead and focus on an anchor. This could be the breath, sound, an external object, movement. There's no right or wrong here. Notice if you have a sense that there is a right or wrong or a better way. Oftentimes we associate the breath as the better way. See if you can acknowledge that and let yourself know that there's nothing particularly special about the breath. The only reason we use it is because, quite frankly, as long as you're alive, you're breathing. So it's something you always have with you. Giving yourself some time to connect with the anchor, the present moment. As you focus on whatever anchor you've chosen, expanding the awareness out to the body as a whole, letting the body be the anchor. The breath is part of the body, so this too is the anchor. Sound is the anchor. If you're using movement as an anchor, this is the whole body as well. And just as doing a bicep curl would strengthen the bicep, focusing on the body in this way is strengthening the prefrontal cortex, helping to create that top-down processing, increasing presence, focus, attention, overall executive functioning. You are literally training your brain in this moment. you focus in this way, see if you can invite in some spaciousness. I'll sort of help in this by spacing out the amount that I'm leading, the amount that I'm saying, and allowing there to be a bit more space, and see if you can be curious about this. Maybe expanding your ability to hold spaciousness internally if it's available to you. Still maintaining connection to the body, to breathing, sound, to the present moment. This is your anchor. And also allowing space to be here. Spaciousness. Being. Noticing wherever the mind is. If it's wandered away, acknowledging this and gently bringing it back. slowly releasing awareness from any anchor. I'm sitting in a moment, just a moment of noticing without a specific anchor, just being. And then when you're ready, slowly and gently ending the practice, honoring it in any way that you'd like to.